Evelyn Hartwell had learned long ago that rejection rarely arrived with cruelty alone. More often, it arrived wrapped in politeness, sealed inside carefully worded letters, and delivered by servants who avoided meeting her eyes. By the age of 27, she had collected enough refusals from noble households to fill an entire drawer. Some claimed she lacked experience. Others insisted they had already hired another governess. A few were honest enough to admit the truth. Her family name carried no influence. Her father had died with little to leave behind except unpaid obligations and fading respectability. When the letter from Ravenshire Manor arrived, she almost did not open it. She sat beside the narrow window of her boarding house for nearly an hour before breaking the seal. The invitation was brief but genuine. Ravenshire Manor required a governess for 3 children. The position was available immediately. For Evelyn, it felt less like an opportunity and more like a final doorway before every other door closed forever. 3 days later, she traveled north beneath gray autumn skies, her small suitcase resting beside her in the carriage. Fields rolled past the windows in endless shades of gold and green. Villages appeared and disappeared. Church spires rose above distant trees. Throughout the journey, she rehearsed introductions and lessons in her mind, attempting to silence the anxiety tightening around her heart. By sunset, Ravenshire Manor appeared beyond a line of ancient oaks. The estate was magnificent. Its towers rose against the fading sky like guardians of another age. Stone walls stretched across acres of carefully tended land. Elegant gardens surrounded the manor, while fountains reflected the last amber rays of sunlight. For a moment, Evelyn wondered if a woman like her truly belonged there. The moment passed when the carriage stopped. A footman opened the door. His expression immediately told her she was unwelcome. "The governess?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. The man did not smile. As she stepped onto the gravel drive, she noticed several servants watching from nearby windows. Their whispers drifted through the cool evening air. "That is her. She looks ordinary enough. A governess from a poor family. The Duke will send her away within a week." The words struck harder than Evelyn wished to admit. She lowered her eyes briefly, gathering herself. Then she lifted her chin. If hardship had taught her anything, it was how to remain graceful while wounded. Inside the manor, the atmosphere felt strangely divided. The building itself radiated wealth and history, yet a heaviness lingered beneath its beauty. Portraits lined the walls. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead. Marble floors reflected the warm light of countless lamps. Yet despite the grandeur, the house felt lonely. The housekeeper escorted Evelyn toward her room. Along the way, she learned that Duke Sebastian Ravenshire was currently in London handling urgent estate matters and would not return for several weeks. "The children have become difficult since their mother's death," the woman explained stiffly. "Most tutors and governesses have not lasted." Evelyn listened quietly. The sadness hidden beneath those words felt deeper than simple misbehavior. After placing her belongings in the modest chamber prepared for her, she realized she could not bear another moment indoors. The journey had been long and the tension of arrival still clung to her nerves. She slipped outside and wandered toward the gardens. Evening sunlight painted the roses in shades of copper and crimson. Gentle wind stirred the hedges. Birds settled among the trees as daylight slowly surrendered to dusk. For the first time that day, Evelyn felt herself breathe freely. Then she heard laughter. She followed the sound around a stone fountain. 3 children stood near the garden wall. The oldest boy attempted to balance atop the edge of the fountain while another boy shouted instructions. A little girl clapped excitedly. The moment the older boy lost his footing, Evelyn reacted instinctively. She rushed forward and caught him before he struck the ground. The boy stared at her. She stared back. For one awkward second, nobody spoke. Then the little girl burst into laughter. "You looked like a flying goose," she declared. The older boy groaned dramatically. "I did not." "You absolutely did." Evelyn smiled despite herself. The children immediately noticed. Something changed. Oliver Ravenshire, age 12, possessed the confidence of a future leader but carried sadness behind his eyes. Theodore, 10, radiated restless curiosity. Clara, 8, seemed to have enough warmth to brighten an entire room. Most adults greeted them with rules. Evelyn greeted them with kindness. Within minutes they were asking questions. Did she like books? Could she ride horses? Was she afraid of thunderstorms? Did she know any adventure stories? Their enthusiasm caught her completely off guard. Before long, they were sitting together beneath an old oak tree while she told them a tale about explorers crossing distant seas. The sun disappeared. The first stars emerged. Yet none of them seemed eager to leave. At supper that evening, the servants noticed something unusual. The children were smiling. Not polite smiles. Not forced smiles. Real ones. They spoke excitedly about their new governess. They interrupted one another trying to tell stories. Clara laughed so hard she nearly dropped her spoon. Even the housekeeper looked surprised. Across the room, however, another observer watched with growing displeasure. Lady Beatrice Ashcroft, the Duke's cousin. Her elegant face remained composed, but her eyes revealed irritation. She had expected the new governess to fail immediately. Instead, the children already seemed enchanted. Evelyn noticed the woman's cold stare but chose not to react. She had survived worse than disapproval. Later that night, after the manor had fallen silent and the candles burned low, 3 small figures slipped through the corridors and gathered inside Oliver's bedroom. The moonlight spilled across the carpet as they sat together in secret. For weeks they had watched governesses come and go. For weeks they had listened to adults talk around them instead of to them. But this woman was different. Finally, Oliver leaned forward. "We cannot let her leave." Theodore immediately nodded. Clara grinned. And while the rest of Ravenshire Manor slept peacefully beneath the autumn stars, the 3 children began creating a plan that would quietly change every life inside the estate forever. The plan began the very next morning. Oliver believed every successful mission required leadership. Theodore believed every successful mission required creativity. Clara believed every successful mission required biscuits. Together, they considered themselves perfectly prepared. Evelyn Hartwell knew nothing about the alliance forming around her. She simply focused on her work. Each morning she met the children in the schoolroom overlooking the eastern gardens. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating rows of untouched books and polished desks that had spent months gathering dust. Previous governesses had struggled to hold the children's attention for even an hour. Evelyn somehow managed to keep them engaged from breakfast until afternoon. She never forced lessons. She transformed them. History became stories of brave explorers and fallen kingdoms. Geography became adventures across oceans and deserts. Literature became conversations rather than lectures. For the first time in years, learning felt alive. Theodore discovered that questions were welcome. Oliver discovered that responsibility did not always mean carrying burdens alone. Clara discovered that mistakes were not disasters. The change happened gradually. Then suddenly, within weeks, Ravenshire Manor felt different. Laughter echoed through corridors that had long remained silent. The gardens became filled with childish voices. The library doors stayed open. Even the servants began noticing the transformation. The children no longer wandered aimlessly through the estate searching for distractions. They sought Evelyn instead. At first, she worried their attachment might be unhealthy. Then she understood the truth. The children were not searching for a governess. They were searching for comfort. One rainy afternoon, while thunder rolled across the distant hills, Clara climbed into a chair beside the schoolroom fireplace. "Did you ever lose someone?" she asked quietly. The question caught Evelyn off guard. The flames crackled softly. Outside, rain tapped against the glass. "Yes," Evelyn answered. Clara lowered her eyes. "We miss Mama every day." The room fell silent. Oliver stared into the fire. Theodore suddenly seemed fascinated by a loose thread on his sleeve. The grief inside the family was always present. Most adults simply pretended otherwise. Evelyn did not. She crossed the room and knelt beside Clara. "I know," she said gently. Those 2 words changed something. No speeches followed. No attempts to replace what had been lost. Only understanding. The children never forgot it. From that day forward, their loyalty deepened. Meanwhile, Lady Beatrice Ashcroft watched everything. The more the children adored Evelyn, the more unsettled she became. For years, Beatrice had enjoyed influence within Ravenshire Manor. She advised servants, managed social affairs, and frequently reminded everyone of her noble blood. Now a woman with no fortune and no connections was becoming the center of the household. It infuriated her. One afternoon, she found Theodore laughing beside Evelyn in the gardens. The sight immediately soured her mood. "A governess should remember her place," she remarked coldly. Theodore's smile vanished. Evelyn rose respectfully. "My place is educating the children, my lady." Beatrice offered a thin smile. "Let us hope your ambitions extend no further." The insult hung in the air long after she departed. Theodore looked furious. Evelyn simply returned to the lesson. Yet the encounter revealed something dangerous. Beatrice was no longer merely disapproving. She was becoming hostile. Days later, Several neighboring families arrived at Ravenshire Manor for a small gathering. The event should have been pleasant. Instead, it became a public humiliation. During tea, one guest asked where Evelyn had been educated. Before she could answer, Beatrice intervened. Miss Hartwell comes from remarkably humble circumstances. The room grew uncomfortable. Several guests exchanged glances. Beatrice continued. It is admirable that Ravenshire offers opportunities to those less fortunate. The words sounded charitable. Their intent was cruel. A few people smiled politely. Others openly smirked. Evelyn felt heat rise into her cheeks. Years of rejection returned in an instant. The familiar shame. The familiar reminder that society measured worth through wealth. She lowered her gaze. Then a chair scraped loudly against the floor. Oliver stood. The entire table looked toward him. Miss Hartwell teaches us more in one day than anyone else has taught us in years. Silence followed. Theodore immediately joined him. She is the best governess we've ever had. Clara nodded vigorously. And she's kind. No one laughed after that. No one spoke at all. For the first time, Beatrice looked genuinely surprised. The children had challenged her publicly. The gathering ended shortly afterward. But the damage lingered. Not for Evelyn. For Beatrice. She realized she was losing control. That evening she retreated to her private sitting room. The windows overlooked the western grounds. Sunset painted the sky in crimson and gold. Her expression hardened. If the children could not be persuaded against Evelyn, another strategy would be necessary. She opened her writing desk. A fresh sheet of paper waited inside. Slowly, carefully, she dipped her pen into ink. Then she began writing. The first letter portrayed Evelyn as manipulative. The second suggested she was encouraging emotional dependence among the children. The third implied she hoped to secure a permanent position through calculated charm. Each accusation became more serious than the last. By midnight, multiple letters were sealed and ready for delivery. The following morning, writers departed for London. Far away, Duke Sebastian Ravenshire remained consumed by estate negotiations, legal disputes, and financial responsibilities. Days passed before Beatrice's letters reached him. One by one he opened them. One by one he read the accusations. At first he dismissed them. Then more arrived. Each painted the same troubling picture. A clever governess. 3 impressionable children. A household gradually falling under her influence. Sebastian trusted few people. Responsibility had taught him caution. By the time he finished the final letter, uncertainty had begun taking root. Meanwhile, back at Ravenshire Manor, Evelyn remained unaware of the storm gathering beyond the estate. She spent her evenings helping Clara practice reading. She listened patiently to Theodore's endless questions. She encouraged Oliver's growing confidence. The alliance between them strengthened daily. The children even began speaking about the future as though Evelyn's presence were permanent. A future she dared not imagine. Then, 3 weeks after her arrival, a sealed message arrived from London. The housekeeper read it. Her eyes widened. News traveled quickly through the manor. Servants whispered. Footmen exchanged glances. Lady Beatrice smiled for the first time in days. And as darkness settled across Ravenshire Manor, a carriage raced through the night carrying a man whose judgment could change every life beneath that roof. Duke Sebastian Ravenshire was coming home far earlier than expected. The news of Duke Sebastian Ravenshire's return spread through the manor faster than a storm crossing open water. Servants hurried through corridors carrying fresh linens and polished silver. Stable hands prepared the grounds. Lamps were lit earlier than usual. Every corner of Ravenshire Manor seemed to awaken with nervous anticipation. No one felt that anticipation more sharply than Evelyn Hartwell. She stood beside the schoolroom window watching gray clouds drift above the distant hills. Her hands remained steady, but her thoughts were far less calm. For weeks she had worked under the protection of absence. Now the master of the estate was returning. The man whose opinion mattered more than anyone else's. The man who had received Lady Beatrice's letters. The man who could dismiss her with a single sentence. Across the room, Theodore looked up from his lesson. You are worried. Evelyn smiled gently. A little. He'll like you. The confidence in the boy's voice made her heart ache. She wished she shared it. Meanwhile, Lady Beatrice Ashcroft was enjoying every moment of uncertainty. For days she had imagined the scene repeatedly. Sebastian arriving. The accusations being confirmed. The governess exposed. The children disappointed. Order restored. She had already convinced herself of the outcome. When evening finally arrived, A carriage rolled through the gates beneath a sky streaked with fading gold. The household assembled near the entrance. Footmen opened the great doors. The carriage stopped. A tall figure emerged. Duke Sebastian Ravenshire had spent years carrying responsibilities that would have exhausted most men. At 38, he possessed the quiet authority of someone accustomed to making difficult decisions. His dark coat was dusted with travel dirt. His posture remained straight despite the long journey. There was strength in him but also weariness. Loss had left its mark. The death of his wife years earlier had carved a permanent shadow behind his eyes. As he stepped into the manor, servants bowed respectfully. Beatrice approached immediately. "Cousin." Sebastian greeted her politely but briefly. His attention was elsewhere. He expected tension. He expected disorder. Instead, he noticed something unusual. The house felt alive. Children's laughter echoed faintly from somewhere upstairs. Fresh flowers decorated the entrance hall. The atmosphere felt warmer than he remembered. It unsettled him. The image painted by Beatrice's letters suddenly seemed less certain. Before he could ask questions, rapid footsteps thundered through the corridor. 3 small figures appeared. "Father." Oliver reached him first. Theodore collided into his side moments later. Clara threw her arms around him without hesitation. For an instant, Sebastian simply stood there holding them. The embrace struck him harder than any welcome he had received in years. His children looked happier. Not merely well-behaved. Happy. The difference was impossible to miss. As they walked together toward the drawing room, the children talked over one another. Oliver spoke about history lessons. Theodore described science experiments. Clara shared a story involving poetry and a runaway rabbit. One name appeared repeatedly. Miss Hartwell. Miss Hartwell said this. Miss Hartwell taught that. Miss Hartwell helped us. Sebastian listened carefully. Their admiration sounded genuine. Not rehearsed. Not manipulated. Genuine. Each compliment weakened the foundation of Beatrice's accusations. Later that evening, after the children had retired, Sebastian requested a meeting with the governess. The message reached Evelyn while she organized books in the schoolroom. Her pulse quickened. The moment had arrived. She followed a servant downstairs. The drawing room glowed softly beneath candlelight. Flames danced inside the fireplace. Shadows flickered across polished wood and shelves lined with leather-bound volumes. Sebastian stood near the hearth. When Evelyn entered, he turned. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The silence felt unexpectedly significant. Evelyn had imagined a cold aristocrat hardened by privilege. Instead, she found a man carrying quiet sorrow beneath composed dignity. Sebastian had expected someone calculating and ambitious. Instead, he found calm intelligence and unmistakable kindness. The contrast surprised them both. "Miss Hartwell." "Your Grace." He invited her to sit. Their conversation began formally. He asked about the children's studies. She answered honestly. He questioned their progress. She described their strengths and weaknesses. Gradually, tension eased. Sebastian discovered she never exaggerated achievements. Evelyn discovered he listened carefully before forming conclusions. Neither noticed how much time had passed. When the meeting finally ended, both carried away impressions that refused to disappear. The following days brought unexpected complications. Sebastian observed everything. He watched lessons from a distance. He noticed Theodore asking questions without fear. He saw Clara smiling more often. He witnessed Oliver developing confidence rather than withdrawing into silence. Every observation supported Evelyn. Yet Beatrice remained relentless. At breakfast she mentioned concerns. At dinner she repeated suspicions. During walks she planted doubts. A woman from her background could not possibly be as innocent as she appeared. A clever governess might easily gain influence over lonely children. Perhaps her kindness was strategic. Perhaps her patience was calculated. The suggestions never stopped. Eventually uncertainty began creeping into Sebastian's thoughts. Not because he trusted Beatrice completely. Because responsibility demanded caution. One afternoon he discovered Evelyn reading beside the lake while Clara sketched wildflowers nearby. The scene appeared peaceful, simple, authentic. Yet Beatrice's warnings echoed in his mind. For the first time, Sebastian felt trapped between evidence and suspicion. The conflict frustrated him. Meanwhile, the children noticed the distance growing between the adults. Their secret alliance immediately resumed operation. Oliver created opportunities for conversations. Theodore invented excuses for shared activities. Clara simply invited both of them everywhere. Some attempts failed. Others succeeded unexpectedly. One evening, while searching the library for a particular book, Sebastian found Evelyn reaching for the same volume. Their hands brushed briefly. Both stepped back. Neither spoke. Yet something shifted. The moment lingered long after it ended. Across the room, Clara nearly smiled herself unconscious. The children's efforts were becoming increasingly obvious. Unfortunately, so was Beatrice's desperation. She realized the situation was slipping beyond her control. Simple accusations were no longer enough. If she wished to remove Evelyn permanently, she needed something stronger. Something undeniable. Something capable of destroying trust completely. Several days later, while reviewing old correspondence and financial records connected to Governess applications, Beatrice discovered a forgotten file containing details about Evelyn Hartwell's family. She read every page carefully. Then she smiled. For the first time in weeks, confidence returned. The information hidden within those papers was painful, deeply personal, and potentially devastating. If revealed publicly, it could shatter Evelyn's reputation before she had any chance to defend herself. That evening, while Ravenshire Manor settled into silence and candlelight glowed behind hundreds of windows, Beatrice locked the file inside her desk and touched the key hanging around her neck. Somewhere else in the manor, Evelyn sat alone wondering whether the Duke truly trusted her. And in her private chamber, Lady Beatrice began planning the moment she would expose a secret she believed could destroy everything Evelyn Hartwell had built. The announcement of Ravenshire Manor's annual charity ball arrived like the opening notes of a grand performance. 4 days, preparations transformed the estate. Chandeliers were polished until they sparkled like captured stars. Marble floors reflected the glow of countless candles. Florists filled every corridor with white roses and fresh greenery. Carriages arrived carrying aristocrats from neighboring counties, each guest bringing wealth, influence, and carefully guarded opinions. Evelyn Hartwell dreaded the event from the moment she received her invitation. She had attended gatherings before. She understood how such rooms worked. People measured one another before exchanging a single word. Family names carried more value than character. Fortunes opened doors that kindness never could. Part of her wished to remain in the schoolroom and avoid the entire evening. But Sebastian personally requested her presence. It would mean a great deal to the children, he said. The sincerity in his voice left her unable to refuse. On the evening of the ball, Ravenshire Manor glowed against the darkness like a palace from a storybook. Music drifted through open windows. Lanterns illuminated the gardens. Elegant guests filled the entrance hall beneath crystal chandeliers. Evelyn descended the grand staircase slowly. Her gown was beautiful but modest compared to the extravagant silks surrounding her. She carried herself with quiet dignity, yet she could already feel curious eyes studying her. Across the ballroom, Sebastian noticed her immediately. The realization irritated him. Not because she looked beautiful. Because he noticed before noticing anyone else. His gaze lingered for a moment too long. Then he forced himself to look away. Nearby, Lady Beatrice observed everything. Her opportunity had finally arrived. For weeks she had prepared. For weeks she had waited. Tonight, she intended to end Evelyn's place within Ravenshire Manor forever. The ballroom soon filled with conversation, laughter, and music. Noblemen discussed investments. Ladies exchanged gossip beneath fans trimmed with lace. Servants moved gracefully through the crowd carrying silver trays. At first, the evening passed peacefully. Evelyn spent much of her time near the children. Oliver proudly introduced her to several guests. Theodore boasted about her lessons. Clara refused to leave her side. Watching them together, Sebastian felt an unexpected warmth. The children had not looked this content since before their mother's death. That truth mattered more than he wished to admit. Unfortunately, Lady Beatrice had no intention of allowing peace to continue. Near the height of the evening, she gathered a small audience beside the ballroom's central staircase. Her timing was flawless. Conversations gradually slowed. Attention shifted toward her. Then toward Evelyn. A chill moved through the room. Beatrice smiled pleasantly. The expression made Evelyn instantly uneasy. "My friends," Beatrice announced, "there is something remarkable about Miss Hartwell that few of you know." The ballroom quieted. Several guests leaned closer. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. Sebastian frowned. Beatrice continued. "Our beloved governess comes from a family whose financial collapse became quite famous several years ago." The words landed like stones. Whispers immediately followed. Some guests exchanged glances. Others listened eagerly. Evelyn remained frozen. She already knew where this was going. Beatrice held several documents in her hand. Miss Hartwell's father died buried beneath debts. The ballroom seemed to shrink around her. Creditors seized nearly everything her family owned. More whispers. More staring. Beatrice's voice remained smooth. Many families considered the Hartwell name a symbol of disgrace. A few guests actually laughed. Not loudly. Not openly. But loudly enough. The sound cut deeper than shouting. Old wounds reopened instantly. Evelyn felt herself transported backward through years of humiliation. Every rejection. Every whispered insult. Every door closed because her family lacked status. She had spent years rebuilding her dignity. Now strangers were dismantling it piece by piece. Across the room, some nobles openly whispered, "A ruined family. How unfortunate. No wonder she became a governess." Imagine bringing someone like that into society. The cruelty spread quickly. Most of it arrived disguised as sophistication. That made it worse. Evelyn stood alone beneath hundreds of watching eyes. No defense seemed possible. No explanation would matter. Facts could not compete with prejudice. For one terrible moment she considered leaving. She imagined walking out of the ballroom. Leaving Ravenshire. Leaving the children. Leaving Sebastian. The thought hurt far more than it should have. Then movement caught her attention. Oliver stepped away from the crowd. The 12-year-old crossed the ballroom without hesitation. Every guest watched. Every conversation stopped. When he reached Evelyn, he took her hand. No speech. No apology. Just loyalty. The gesture alone stunned the room. Seconds later, Theodore followed. He positioned himself beside her. His young face burned with anger. Then Clara appeared. The little girl wrapped both arms around Evelyn's waist. The silence deepened. 3 children had answered cruelty with love. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Tears threatened Evelyn's composure. She fought them back. The children had chosen her. Not because of status. Not because of reputation. Because of who she was. Across the ballroom, Sebastian watched everything. His chest tightened. For weeks he had struggled between suspicion and trust. Between Beatrice's accusations and his own observations. Now he saw the truth clearly. Not within the documents. Within the reactions. Beatrice wielded another person's suffering like a weapon. The children defended that same person without hesitation. The difference revealed everything. Slowly, Sebastian began walking. The crowd parted automatically. His expression remained calm. Yet something dangerous simmered beneath the surface. When he reached Evelyn, he stopped beside her. The entire ballroom waited. Beatrice smiled confidently. She believed victory had arrived. Instead, she watched it disappear. Sebastian looked directly at the assembled guests. Then he spoke. "The only person in this room who has demonstrated true nobility is Miss Evelyn Hartwell." Silence crashed across the ballroom. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The statement carried more power than any raised voice. Sebastian continued. "She has shown patience where others showed judgment." His gaze swept across the guests. Compassion where others offered cruelty. Several nobles lowered their eyes. Integrity where others have hidden behind titles. The embarrassment spreading through the room became impossible to miss. The same people who had whispered moments earlier suddenly found the floor fascinating. Beatrice's confidence evaporated. For the first time all evening, she appeared uncertain. The crowd had turned. Not completely, but enough. The balance of power shifted before everyone's eyes. Evelyn stood speechless. She had expected humiliation. She had prepared herself for rejection. She had not prepared for someone standing beside her. Especially Sebastian. The music never resumed properly afterward. Conversations became subdued. Guests departed earlier than expected. The glittering evening ended beneath a strange mixture of shame and reflection. Long after the final carriage disappeared into the darkness, Sebastian remained awake. Moonlight filtered through the windows of his study. The manor had fallen silent. Yet his thoughts refused to settle. He remembered Evelyn's courage. The children's devotion. The pain in her eyes when the insults began. Most of all, he remembered how fiercely he wanted to protect her. The realization arrived slowly. Then all at once. It had nothing to do with gratitude. Nothing to do with admiration. Nothing to do with duty. Standing alone in the darkness, Sebastian Ravenshire finally understood the truth he had been avoiding for weeks. He was falling in love with his governess. And somewhere else in the sleeping manor, Lady Beatrice Ashcroft sat before a candlelit desk, staring at forged documents she had only just completed, convinced she still possessed one final way to destroy everything. The morning after the charity ball arrived beneath pale autumn sunlight, but peace did not return to Ravenshire Manor. Lady Beatrice Ashcroft had suffered a public defeat, yet humiliation only sharpened her determination. While the household slowly recovered from the previous evening's scandal, she locked herself inside her private sitting room and prepared her final attack. If she could not destroy Evelyn Hartwell through gossip, she would destroy her through evidence. Forged evidence. By noon, carefully fabricated documents lay spread across her desk. False letters suggested that Evelyn had secretly manipulated the children to secure influence within the household. Invented correspondence implied she hoped to marry into wealth. Every page had been crafted with precision. To an outsider, the deception appeared convincing. Beatrice smiled as she examined her work. Victory finally seemed within reach. Meanwhile, Evelyn spent the morning with Clara in the gardens, helping her identify late-blooming roses. The little girl skipped between flowerbeds while speaking enthusiastically about future lessons. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn allowed herself a small measure of happiness. The previous evening had changed something. Not simply because Sebastian had defended her. Because someone had chosen her when society had chosen cruelty. The memory still warmed her heart. Unfortunately, the calm did not last. That afternoon, Sebastian received a sealed packet delivered directly to his study. The contents appeared alarming. The forged documents. For several long minutes he examined every page. Doubt returned immediately. Not because he believed Evelyn capable of manipulation. Because betrayal had touched nearly every important chapter of his life. Experience had taught him caution. The possibility, however small, demanded investigation. Word of the documents spread through the manor with alarming speed. Servants whispered. Tension returned. When Evelyn learned of the accusations, her heart sank. She had endured suspicion before. Yet this felt different. This time the opinions that mattered belonged to people she genuinely cared about. Most of all, Sebastian. That evening he requested a private conversation. The meeting took place in the library. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The atmosphere felt heavy. Evelyn entered quietly. Sebastian stood beside the fireplace holding several papers. Neither looked comfortable. Finally he spoke. Someone has presented troubling accusations. The words hurt more than she expected. Not because of their content. Because she heard uncertainty beneath them. Evelyn remained silent for a moment. Then she lifted her eyes. Do you believe them? The question struck directly at the heart of the matter. Sebastian hesitated. The hesitation itself was painful. Yet before he could answer, Evelyn stepped closer. Years of hardship had taught her many things. One lesson mattered most. Truth required courage. Your Grace, she said softly, I cannot defend myself against lies I did not create. I can only tell you that everything I have done for your children came from affection, not ambition. The sincerity in her voice was impossible to ignore. Sebastian looked at her. Really looked at her. Not as a governess. Not as a suspect. As Evelyn. The woman who had restored laughter to his home. The woman who comforted his children when no one else could reach them. The woman whose presence had quietly become essential. Something about the accusation suddenly felt wrong. Deeply wrong. That instinct proved correct sooner than either expected. The following morning, Theodore accidentally uncovered the first crack in Beatrice's scheme. While searching for drawing paper inside a storage cabinet, he discovered discarded practice sheets containing handwriting identical to the forged letters. Curiosity led him to Oliver. Oliver brought the evidence to Sebastian. Within hours, additional inconsistencies emerged. Dates did not match. Signatures differed. Witnesses contradicted the claims. One servant even admitted seeing Beatrice working on the documents late at night. The entire deception began unraveling. By evening, the truth stood exposed. Sebastian summoned Beatrice to the drawing room. Several senior staff members attended. Evelyn remained absent, unaware of what was unfolding. For the first time since arriving at Ravenshire Manor, Beatrice found herself unable to control the conversation. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Every excuse collapsed. Every denial weakened. Eventually silence replaced resistance. Her guilt became undeniable. Sebastian's disappointment carried more force than anger. I trusted you, he said quietly. The words landed harder than any accusation. Beatrice lowered her gaze. For a moment she appeared smaller than ever before. Not powerful. Not influential. Simply bitter. A woman whose jealousy had consumed her judgment. The following day she departed Ravenshire Manor. No dramatic farewell followed. No tears. No reconciliation. Only consequences. As her carriage disappeared beyond the gates, An invisible weight seemed to lift from the estate. The servants relaxed. The children celebrated openly. Sunlight itself appeared brighter. For the first time Ravenshire felt free. Yet one important matter remained unresolved. Sebastian found Evelyn later that afternoon beside the lake where autumn leaves drifted across still water. The wind stirred gently through the trees. She looked peaceful, beautiful, and suddenly he realized he no longer wished to spend another day hiding the truth. Evelyn. She turned. The expression in his eyes immediately made her heart race. For several seconds neither spoke. Words felt strangely inadequate. Then Sebastian stepped closer. You changed this house. His voice was low. You changed my children. Emotion tightened his throat. And somehow you changed me. Evelyn's eyes glistened. The silence between them filled with unspoken feelings. I spent months convincing myself my gratitude was the reason I could not stop thinking about you. A faint smile touched his lips. I was wrong. The world seemed to hold its breath. I love you. The words settled softly between them. Simple. Honest. Irrevocable. Tears filled Evelyn's eyes. Not from sadness. From relief. Because she had been carrying the same secret for weeks. I fell in love with the children first, she whispered. A small laugh escaped her. Then I realized I had fallen in love with their father. The answer shattered the final distance between them. When Sebastian gently took her hand, neither wanted to let go. Unknown to them, 3 small conspirators witnessed everything from a very safe distance behind nearby hedges. Their celebration nearly gave away their hiding place. 3 days later, those same conspirators launched what Oliver proudly called their greatest operation. Under the pretense of a family picnic, they guided Sebastian and Evelyn to a secluded meadow overlooking the estate. Blankets covered the grass. Wildflowers danced in the breeze. The entire setting felt suspiciously organized. By the time Sebastian realized he had been manipulated, it was too late. Oliver grinned. Theodore looked delighted. Clara bounced excitedly. Now, Clara announced, you may continue. Sebastian laughed. Then he knelt. The world seemed to stop. Evelyn's breath caught. Every dream she had buried throughout years of rejection suddenly returned. Not as impossible fantasies. As reality. Miss Evelyn Hartwell, Sebastian said, will you become my wife? Tears escaped before she could answer. Yes. The children erupted into cheers loud enough to frighten nearby birds. Yet the most emotional moment came afterward. Clara stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Evelyn. Her voice trembled. Will you stay with us forever? Evelyn dropped to her knees. She hugged all 3 children tightly. Forever. The wedding took place 6 weeks later at Ravenshire Manor. Guests arrived from across the county. This time society came not to judge but to celebrate. Oliver, Theodore, and Clara walked proudly beside Evelyn as she crossed the gardens toward Sebastian. No one watching failed to understand what made the moment special. This was not merely a marriage. It was the completion of a family. Years later, beneath a golden sunset, Sebastian and Evelyn stood together overlooking the gardens. Oliver was nearly grown. Theodore still asked endless questions. Clara's laughter still filled the estate. The home once haunted by grief now overflowed with life. Evelyn watched the children running across the lawn and remembered arriving at Ravenshire Manor carrying a single suitcase and a lifetime of rejection. She had come as the governess nobody wanted. She had expected another disappointment. Instead, 3 lonely children had opened a door that society tried desperately to keep closed. And because they chose kindness when others chose judgment, she now stood beside the man she loved, surrounded by the family they had all needed from the very beginning.